Okay, this is part 6 of Lymphatic System Secrets, and to everyone that emailed me wanting to know when in the world I was going to put this up, I appreciate your patience. In this section, we're going to take a brief look at 3 very different doctors on 2 different continents who were able to achieve remarkable success in part by harnessing the power of the lymphatic system. Around 1980 or so, a doctor by the name of Joseph Waltz was enabling people to heal themselves using electricity via a thin wire that contained 4 electrodes into the upper spine. These were implanted, and they were attached to a portable power pack around the waist. Now, this would send low-voltage DC currents into the spine, and you know what? He was very successful in treating patients with all kinds of neurological disorders. Now, you can go over to Google Video right now and type in Dr. Joseph Waltz, W-A-L-T-Z, and it will lead you right to a 40-minute video of before and after clips taken of people with various neurological disorders. You can see the visible improvements they made after being exposed to this therapy involving electrical stimulation. In 1981, a very welcome book was published detailing the importance of our lymphatic system, otherwise known as our second circulatory system. This book was The Golden 7+1 by Dr. C. Samuel West. And in this book, and detailed in some other products also put out by Dr. West, the account is given of Dr. West contacting Dr. Joseph Waltz in New York and discussing his successes with placing electrodes in people with these neurological disorders. Dr. West asked Dr. Waltz, basically, "Do you know why your electrodes are working so well to help these people under your care?" And Dr. Waltz replied in so many words that they had some theories, but no real concrete answers at the time. So Dr. West told Dr. Joseph Waltz his theory. The lymphatic system has a hard time removing clumps of albumin in the cellular areas, but once these clumps are hit with an electric charge, the clumps will dissipate into much smaller particles, and the lymphatic system can now remove the excess albumin, the excess water that is drowning the cells, the excess sodium, the fermented glucose, and when all these impurities are removed by the lymphatic system, oxygen can get to the cells, causing a chain reaction that turns the cells back on, and the patient can function better than ever before. Dr. Joseph Waltz said that makes the most sense out of everything I've heard so far. And you can see a letter that Dr. Waltz sent to Dr. West on page 184 of the book The Golden 7+1, confirming the discussion that these 2 men had. Now let's go over to Europe. A second doctor was introduced to the public around the same time frame and was using electricity and electrodes with patients and also having great success. His name was Dr. Bjorn Nordenstrom from Sweden, where he was the head of the world-famous Karolinska Institute. Now, he was the subject of an article in the April 1986 Discover magazine. He was also on 60 Minutes, I believe, 2020, and appeared in other TV shows as well. The difference between Dr. Waltz in New York and Dr. Nordenstrom in Sweden was Dr. Nordenstrom was having tremendous success with cancer, in particular tumors in the lungs and breasts. His colleagues would send him to patients that had not responded to any other treatments and were left to die. In one group of 20 people who were labeled incurable, his success rate was 50%. Now, rather than just reveal his discoveries to the medical world bits and pieces at a time, in medical journals and other dry official channels for letting your colleagues know what you're up to, Dr. Nordenstrom just went ahead and self-published a book on his theories. It's called Biologically Closed Electrical Circuits, and it really shook up the field of medicine when it was released. He was greeted with anger, ridicule, suspicion, open hostility. How dare this man publicly publish his theories and techniques on how he removes tumors and makes them dissolve away? We should be allowed to see his work first, and we will decide if we can understand what he is up to before anyone else. Let's face it, the medical community was jealous. One doctor spent a year going through the book page by page, looking for inconsistencies, loopholes, or errors. He couldn't find any. Now, this book is the end result of the thinking process of a brilliant man who looked at what everyone else was looking at too, but with the eyes of imagination, and this allowed him to see things that others before him either dismissed or refused to see. Dr. Nordenstrom's work actually has some parallels to our discussion of the lymphatic system here. Both Dr. West and Dr. Nordenstrom published a book that showed how there was yet another circulatory system within the body that people should be paying more attention to. And if more people became familiar with this additional circulatory system, they could actually alter the environment within them to the point that disease would have a difficult time gaining a foothold. Dr. Nordenstrom was talking about an invisible electrical circulatory system in the body. Dr. Nordenstrom saw the presence of invisible electrical activity impacting the visible world, just like when the wind blows and carries leaves and trash with it across your yard. That's the effect of the invisible world on the visible. Dr. Nordenstrom went on to become chairman of the Nobel Prize Committee in Medicine and Physics. I want to read you a quote from a book written by a completely different medical doctor who also used electricity to heal. Quote, "Electricity proper acts chemically upon the blood by increasing the oxygen and expelling impurities from the system. It also acts directly upon tumors, dissolving and removing them." End quote. Now, what did we just learn about the lymph system a couple of minutes ago? When blood proteins are hit by electricity, they scatter. The lymph system picks them up along with all the other impurities. Oxygen can reach the formerly waterlogged cells, and this causes an electrochemical chain reaction that turns the cells back on and the healing process begins. Oh, did I mention that the book I just read that quote from was printed in 1877? Yes, 133 years ago. The doctor that wrote this book knew back then that electricity could jumpstart a person's healing process. He may not have known the power of the lymphatic system, but he had the basic principles down cold. And it's interesting to me that this doctor from 1877 also wrote this in his book. Quote, "Originally, it was not my intention to say anything regarding the philosophy or theory of the application of electricity. Individually, I should prefer to adhere to my first resolution and leave theories and speculations to others, presenting only the mechanical operation, leaving others to form their own opinions as regards the why and the wherefore. The normal condition of the body is health, the abnormal condition, disease." End quote. So in other words, he knew the basic process that led to the healing of his patients. But he may have realized that he didn't know the exact chemical or electrochemical chain reaction that occurs, but today we do have that understanding, and it's backed up by hard science and empirical evidence. 133 years ago, this medical doctor was dissolving tumors, just like Dr. Bjorn Nordenstrom was doing in the 70s, the 80s, and beyond. There's other interesting passages in this old book, but time does not permit their discussion. So, after looking at all the information in previous sections of this series, and knowing that electricity can dissolve blockages of blood proteins, and looking at the success of these three doctors who used electricity to heal, do you think that their success, in part, was due to the ability of low current electrical charges boosting the capabilities of a person's lymphatic system? That's something to think about, isn't it? I wanted to bring out this information before we went on to part 7, because you needed to see that there are real-world examples of doctors using very low currents of electricity, which we now realize allow the lymphatic system to work more efficiently and establish an environment where accelerated healing can take place. We didn't even cover the work of the greats like Dr. Robert O. Becker, Dr. Bob Beck, and many, many others, who were also greeted with anger, hostility, suspicion when they presented their work to the public. It's the same thing. Decade after decade, century after century, people don't like change. Okay, so hang on, because we're about to go into the Twilight Zone. I'm going to show you products that you can purchase, and the manufacturers probably have no idea these devices have on the lymphatic system, because their advertising doesn't even talk about it, because they're marketed for completely different purposes. But I'm going to show you how they will enable your body to achieve accelerated healing ability. All the information you need to start obtaining a device that you can order off the net and hold in your hand to start enhancing the power of your lymphatic system will be given in the first 10 seconds of part 7.